Alright, welcome to a new stream, everybody. We've got a neat follow-up on the ChatGPT plugin for Blender. So it's pretty useful for animation. That's kind of what I want to go over today. Basically, last time I was using it to kickstart scenes, which I think can still be the case, but I think just to inject some quick motion graphics is something I've been playing with it. And for now, it does a pretty decent job of it. So before we get into it, I just want to quickly thank all the people who have recently subscribed to the channel. Love to have you all here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, consider hitting that button now. So let's get right into it. We are looking at a quick little scene. So this right here was just created using 2 prompts. So the plugin shows up right here, and as we usually do, we can go to preferences, install, and then enable your ChatGPT plugin. There is an extra step, which is once you open the body right here, you have to add in your API key, and you can check out the link in the video to see where you need to get that. And you also need to be able to enable payment, because every time you put in a prompt through and you're using resources, you're using fractions of a cent of resources to actually have that happen. But basically, you get that linked up, and on the plugin over here on the side, you can enter your message. And I find that actually just requesting things as if you're asking Blender to do them is the best way to actually get consistent results. It's a little bit more difficult to edit things that are already in your scene, although it is possible at times. But the more specific you can be in the beginning, I find that's easier. So here I put create an animation of 2 moving ink blobs with smooth movement. And then I followed up with add a curve that appears to move diagonally through the scene. So the curve actually wasn't animated. We can try right now as I pause the animation to add that in. So we can request to help it out a little bit. Select it first and hit animate the selected object to float through the scene. We can be more specific in the x-axis, negative. Even more specifically, we can do add some floating movement as well. And then we hit execute, and it asks us to please wait. This might take some time. So depending on what you ask it to do, it'll take, different amount of times and also different amount of credits. So it looks like it did something. We didn't get an error message, and we can actually see the curve moving. Yeah, I mean, it basically did it. It didn't quite reference the camera. That's what I noticed. It's, I guess, dependent on just the units that you have set, and it kind of uses arbitrary units unless you specify numbers, such as make the sphere 1 meter in diameter, or so and so inches, or this length, or this position, these many degrees to rotate. But I think as a primer for doing just some quick motion elements could be interesting. Before we move on to the other example I had, I'm going to quickly do one more here, which would be to select the blobs, these 2 blobs, and we can add in, apply a wireframe modifier that animates from solid to almost completely wireframe. Let's see if it's able to pull that off. That's a little bit tricky. And in the meantime, we can start pulling up our other example file. Okay, so that didn't fail. Oh, it did do it. That's pretty neat. So the values are all off, but if I go all the way to the beginning and I go into modifiers, here we have our wireframe modifier, and we're on our keyframe because this is yellow. So this is just too high of a number. So I'll modify the number. It does need a little bit of help. So I'll set that as the new keyframe. And then there should, oh, it looks like every frame was keyframed. So changing that might be tricky. So specifying that, yeah, specifying numbers is useful. Let's try this instead. If I add a wireframe modifier here, and I see this thickness 0.02, and I want to go all the way to 0.1, 0.02 to 0.1. So I'll ask animate this wireframe modifier to go from 0.02 to 0.1. That's what it was, right? And we'll hit execute. I would imagine it'd be able to add the wireframe modifier anyway, but just for testing's sake, I figured I'd help it out with already placing the modifier. Okay. That it added another wireframe modifier. It does go to 0.2. Was 0.1 too much? 0.02. Weird. I thought I remembered having oh, because it stacked it, so I have to get rid of the first one. Right. So I just get rid of mine, and then I just look at the one that it created, and that one is correct. Yeah. Okay. Neat. So the other example, we'll close this instance. I've got example 2. Let's just close out of this. Okay, so this one was actually meant for a product shot. So if I move the camera in place over that cube, and maybe I change the camera settings, I've found that it's better to just start and then adjust your camera according to however the scene came about. So this could be cool to do a little animation from the beginning, like zoomed out to here, and then as we go all the way through, I want to just zoom into right there. So this sequence with ChatGPT started out with create a surreal landscape, and we had all these different shapes and the plane pop in. Add shaders to the objects at random, but keep it to trippy colors. So I guess by trippy, it went with some really just primary, really saturated colors, which I guess is kind of trippy. I'd maybe change the floor plate to a desaturated black. Yeah. Or there's no like orange shapes. Oops, that's the subsurface color. There's an emission color. Anyhow, I think that's better. Yeah. Oh, there is orange, but that's cool. That works. Okay. So adding the frames actually, or adding the shaders actually worked really well. So sometimes it can do those modifications on an object that you needed to do. However, when I did ask it to add lights to do soft ambient scene, I find that that's just not specific enough, as was with the colors, right? So you kind of have to give it either the more information on not even style, but like specifically like pastel colors or desaturated or within this value range. It does great with numbers. So if you can at least like test out at first what colors you want, get some values like RGBs or keyframe numbers and whatever values with the program you need to get, and then you actually ask it to do those settings either for animations or for coloring or for whatever input you're asking it, but you ask it in a number format. Does that save time? You know, I mean, you can write out a set of instructions for what you want in a scene, or you could even break down a reference into a prompt and kind of like start creating your own version of that using this. That's kind of how I see, you know, me using this if I had to like put it into my work, into my workflow. So let's see if we can do a product animation here. Some of the other I did ask it to add a gradient background, and that's when I got an error. I'm not sure if that's because I was trying to run ChatGPT in 2 instances at once. So you might have to keep that in mind. You might only be able to run it in 1 instance of Blender at a time. But let's combine this with Blender Kit and look for a model. So we can just look for, I don't know what sort of product would go well here. Maybe like some sort of toy. I mean, it's like really playful, really colorful. I mean, at this point, it's more like a little movie. None of this quite makes sense, except maybe for this. Let's see what I mean. If I move this up, it's just I'm gonna delete some of these spheres. So like delete these. They're like right on top of the cube. Okay, cool. You know what would be neat if I could have ChatGPT make it so the rings fall into place. That would be interesting. So let's see if we can do that. We'll select the rings. We'll get out of render mode because that's gonna destroy us. Okay, and we'll do, what's the ask? Let's go to maybe the last keyframe and ask it to insert a keyframe here that staggers the pieces, staggers the objects on the z-axis by 2 units. So what I'm trying to achieve here is see if I can't just have these objects displaced so they're all moved a certain distance rather than me having to move them. Oh, that scattered everything. Not what I wanted. That staggers the objects. I had to specify the selected objects. Let's try that out. Semantics, syntax, whatever that is gets classified here as. Okay, so the other one's disappeared. Well, that's 2 units, I guess, which is really, really far. And I added a keyframe there, so let's see if I go to the beginning. Oh, I should have just keyframed it where it was. So you want to keyframe this already. We'll just do the whole position, and then we'll do Control L. Does that apply the keyframes for all? It does not. All right, just keyframing my rings real quick for the beginning. It's probably a way easier way to do this. Select them all, and then we'll try, instead of 2 units, let's do 0.3 units. And that was pretty quick previously, so we should get that soon. That's still really, really far. Oh my goodness. I did it in the beginning. There we go. Go back into our camera view. Okay. It's just going in reverse, which, you know what? I'm gonna roll with it. Does it look weird rendered? Probably looks weird. Oh, you know what? This probably looks really cool from top view. If the light were right on top. Okay, I'm gonna switch to Eevee just so we can appreciate this real quick. Oh, our colors went away in Eevee. Oh, they're loading. There we go. Oh, they kind of consume up the light. So let's move the light up. That's kind of a great place for a light. Yeah, so from the top view, we're kind of getting this cool little effect, but from camera view, yeah, I don't know. We'd want to have that happen in reverse. Maybe we can ask it to reverse it. So I have to select all the objects. And maybe, since they are the same objects, I can ask it to reverse the position of these same selected objects. That's it. I hope it understands the context. So if we see the red ring at the bottom now, nope. How does that look? Oh, they just like, did they just move down? What if I just rotate it? It didn't let me. RZ, no, RX 180. Oh, Control I, right? To make no, whoa. I thought Control I was to make a keyframe. Insert keyframes. Oh, it's just I. Okay, undo. There we go. I. Location. Okay, now we got something. Their initial position is now screwed up. I have to do RX 180 on this too. And then I guess save that position. There we go. Alright, now I have to change the light location. But anyway, this is Eevee. I mean, this is not how it's gonna look in the end. But with a little help of ChatGPT, I guess that was easier than just manually going through and doing that. There's probably an easier way even with nodes. But the fact that I just kind of did this transforming and using ChatGPT, I think is more natural than using nodes. I mean, I love nodes, but if you're especially like a beginner user and wondering how you can use AI to kind of help you, if you're just having to pull, rotate, move things around, and you know how to insert keyframes, change shaders a little bit, then it's all good. Maybe we can do, like, for example, these red balls. I want to switch to the same texture that this shape has, right? Like all these red ones. So this is color 3. So I can ask replace all objects with replace all what's the right way to say this? Not replace all objects. Replace the material of all objects with color 3, write it exactly as it is, with ring 1 to ring 1, I guess. That would be great. So it doesn't even matter what I have selected. It should be able to identify, yep, the spheres that are red, and it applied this material to it, ring 1. Awesome. And if I go to my orphan data in Blender over here, and I go to, there's no materials. I would have thought that the color 3 material would be here if no other object has it, which means something does still have it. But that's fine. As far as I can tell, it worked fine. So same thing, right? Now I want to copy that prompt. Oh, come on. I can't copy the text from the previous prompt, really. So I have to type it all out. Replace the material of all objects with color 4 with ring 3. Yep. And we'll copy that. This is pretty neat. It makes life so easy. And having to select all those objects and having to go do that myself. So now I can just paste, and I'm doing color 1 with ring 2, counting from the bottom. Oh, this is when the naming of your objects and your materials and just like in general, just your naming convention is so important, because if you can just off the top of your head like start writing in your prompts to have certain things happen, and ChatGPT is just picking up how you label things, and think of the time. All right, we've replaced enough, so maybe I'll do some things to refine here, maybe play with the lighting a little bit. I do think the lighting will look way better in cycles. But this is basically roughly what we have for an animation right now. I mean, it looks super noisy because the denoiser doesn't. Let's test that out. I've never pushed my computer that quickly. We're just gonna do, I suppose, one sample and one sample. Oh wow. Okay, so it's still a lot of flicker, but I can kind of get away with playing a cycles animation. So yeah, made with ChatGPT and then some other little tricks. Forget, I can just, if I don't want to do it for all these objects together, can I go select all these objects, last touch, reverse the position of the first and last keyframe for the selected objects. I'm going to do a final thing. To see if I can't add a color to the background again. Okay, let's see if that worked out. So these things should be popping into place. No? Oh goodness. Oh! They were. That just needs to happen way sooner. It happened way too fast. Are they way too high up? There we go. For a quick little example, if you get any clipping like this for an orthographic camera, I'm going to go over to the camera and we're going to switch over to right here under lens. We've got the clipping start. We just want to turn that value down. So 0.001, even lower, or we move the camera away. We can't just do 0, can we? Because the camera is actually cutting through the object. Great. There we go. It's a little bit more zoomed out, but still valid. And last one, we'll do add, I want to see how specific I need to be for the background color. Change the background to a orange. Let's do blue. Blue to white gradient from top to bottom. Change the background color specifically to a All right, so here we have for the world settings the background. Hopefully it understands that, and then specifically let's change this color to a gradient that goes from blue to white. So if it's able to do that, it saves quite a bit of time, because setting up a gradient is actually with the proper UV mapping is I mean, it's not that difficult, but it's just like if you can do a little bit of lighting, a little bit of placing objects, a little bit of texture manipulation, and a little bit of environment, you know, you kind of like kickstart everything. So it gives an error executing generated code. Shader node text gradient has no attribute for coloring. Whatever. Gradient texture. And there's our gradient. We'll go to shader. We'll switch to world. And we need to add here a vector. Can we do a texture coordinate? Yeah. Texture coordinate. We take generated into vector, and we add in a vector math in between. This is basically what ChatGPT is creating behind the scenes at times. And oh, just kidding. Isn't there a rotate vector? Vector rotate. There we go. This is what ChatGPT is doing behind the scenes when it's creating some of these things. It'll use some node setups. And center, axis, angle. There we go. Rotate the angle. That's not the axis I want though. So we'll switch the axis that has the 1 value. There we go. And it'll need to be an even 90. And right here we add in a color ramp to go from blue to white. And we can push the white down more intensely. Fantastic. Look how much better that looks. How much happier. Yeah, the distribution of these objects is interesting. But alright, I'm gonna put out an animation from here. But this is quite a bit. So this is a total of, I don't know, about a dozen commands that I put in here to make this happen. And as sort of like storyboarding, like if you want to go from, if you're doing animations, if you're doing like different render sets, if you want to go from like sketching out what your deliverables are and going to a quick mock-up to then refine this, you know, I mean, I think this took a lot of the guesswork out, because at this point it's just refining this, make it look a little bit better, maybe more oriented towards reference. But you know, hopefully showing this off gives you another reason to be using ChatGPT and applying it into this type of workflow if, you know, you happen to also use Blender. And if not, ChatGPT plugins exist for a bunch of programs. So similar to this, it happens to work more directly with commands as a plugin, I've found. So thanks for watching, and we'll catch me tomorrow at 7 p.m. Hope to see you there. And again, always a pleasure to have more of you here. Thanks again for that. Hit the subscribe if you found this helpful. More of this to come. See you in the next one.